is about the Apollo 11 moon landing, the rocket, the astronauts, the lunar module, the first steps, and the long human dream of reaching another world. So sit back, get comfortable, and imagine the moon hanging quietly outside a dark window. Tonight we are going to speak softly about the moon landing. On July 20th, 1969, Apollo 11 landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin descended to the lunar surface in the lunar module Eagle, while Michael Collins orbited above in the command module Columbia. The moon landing was a technological achievement, a political event, a scientific mission, and a symbolic moment in human history. It belonged to the space race, but it also belonged to a much older dream, looking up at the moon and wondering what it would be like to stand there. The Apollo program grew during the Cold War, when the United States and the Soviet Union competed in space exploration. The Soviet Union had achieved major firsts: the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, and the first human in space, Yuri Gagarin. In 1961, President John F. Kennedy set the goal of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth before the decade was out. That sentence contained an enormous engineering challenge. It required rockets, computers, navigation, materials, training, life support, communication, and thousands of people working across many institutions. Before Apollo 11 could fly, there had to be many earlier steps. The moon landing was not a single leap from Earth to the lunar surface. It was a staircase of missions, each one testing a different part of the problem. Project Mercury asked whether one person could survive and work in space. Project Gemini tested longer flights, spacewalks, rendezvous, docking, and the skills needed to guide spacecraft with precision. These missions were not as famous as Apollo 11, but they taught NASA how to move from theory into practice. There were also tragedies. In 1967, the Apollo 1 crew, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee, died in a cabin fire during a ground test. The accident led to major redesigns and forced the program to confront the danger of the work. Spaceflight was never routine, even when procedures made it look orderly. So, when Apollo 11 finally stood on the launch pad, it carried more than fuel and equipment. It carried years of testing, failure, correction, courage, grief, and accumulated knowledge. The quiet image of a rocket at night contains all of that hidden preparation. Apollo 11 launched on a Saturn V rocket from Kennedy Space Center on July 16th, 1969. The Saturn V remains one of the most powerful rockets ever flown. It lifted the spacecraft away from Earth in stages, each stage burning, separating, and allowing the mission to continue. After reaching Earth orbit, Apollo 11 performed a maneuver called translunar injection, sending it toward the moon. The journey took several days. Inside the spacecraft, the astronauts lived in a small environment of checklists, instruments, radio communication, meals, sleep, and constant procedure. Space travel can look smooth from far away, but up close is a discipline of details. When Apollo 11 reached lunar orbit, Armstrong and Aldrin entered the lunar module Eagle. Collins remained in Columbia, orbiting alone around the moon. The lunar module was strange looking because it was designed only for space and the moon's low gravity. It did not need to fly through air. It had thin legs, angular surfaces, and a practical, delicate appearance. During descent, alarms sounded from the computer, but mission control slow itself from orbital speed, descend toward an unfamiliar surface, and preserve enough fuel to land safely or abort if necessary. Inside Eagle, Armstrong and Aldrin watched instruments, listened to mission control, and moved through procedures they had practiced many times on Earth. But no simulator could make the real moon completely predictable. The surface below them was not an abstract map anymore. It was a landscape of craters, shadows, dust, and scattered rocks. As they came closer, Armstrong saw that the automatic guidance was taking them toward a rougher area than he wanted. He took more manual control, flying the lunar module forward to search for safer ground. Fuel was running low. The moment was calm in the voices, but intense in the numbers. Mission Control called out the remaining fuel in seconds. Eagle moved over the surface, almost hovering, until Armstrong found a place that looked safe enough. The landing was not simply a scheduled arrival, it was a careful human decision made above a world no one had ever touched. The words, "The Eagle has landed," announced that the lunar module was safely on the surface. The landing site was in the Sea of Tranquility, a broad lunar plain. Several hours later, Armstrong descended the ladder. His first step onto the moon became one of the most famous moments in history. Aldrin followed, describing the scene as magnificent desolation. The astronauts moved carefully in bulky suits, collected samples, took photographs, deployed experiments, and planted a flag. The moonwalk lasted a little over 2 hours. The moon itself is quiet in a way Earth is not. There is no breathable atmosphere, no wind in the ordinary sense, no flowing water on the surface, no trees, no insects, no weather like ours. Footprints can remain for a very long time because there is no rain to wash them away. The lunar surface is covered in regolith, a layer of dust and broken rock. The sky appears black even in daylight because there is no atmosphere to scatter sunlight the way Earth's sky does. To stand there was to stand in a place both near and profoundly foreign. Michael Collins' role is sometimes quieter in memory, but it was essential. While Armstrong and Aldrin were on the surface, Collins orbited the moon alone. Each time Columbia passed behind the moon, radio contact with Earth was lost. That image is powerful. One person in orbit around another world, temporarily cut off from every human voice. Yet he was not separate from the mission. He was the one who would bring the lunar module crew back into the command module for the journey home. Apollo 11 was not one person's achievement. It was a choreography of trust. After leaving the lunar surface, the ascent stage of Eagle rejoined Columbia in lunar orbit. The astronauts transferred samples and equipment, then began the journey back to Earth. On July 24th, 1969, Apollo 11 splashed down in the Pacific Ocean. The mission had fulfilled Kennedy's goal, landing humans on the moon and returning them safely to Earth. The scientific samples helped researchers study lunar geology. The photographs reshaped human imagination. Earth, seen from space, helped many people think differently about our planet. Small, blue, fragile, and shared. The moon landing remains famous because it combines precision and wonder. It required equations, engines, checklists, radio signals, and courage. But it also carried something older than engineering, the human habit of looking beyond the horizon. Apollo 11 did not solve Earth's problems. No single achievement could. But it showed that a difficult goal could gather many kinds of work into one focused effort. It humanity a new memory. Footprints in grey dust under a black sky. As this lecture closes, imagine the lunar module standing quietly on the moon. The surface is pale, the shadows are sharp, Earth hangs in the distance, blue and white against darkness. The astronauts have gone, the equipment is still, the footprints remain. There is no wind to move them. For tonight, let the moon become calm again. Not a race, not a headline, but a silent world that people once crossed carefully, step by step, while all of Earth listened. And yet, before we move away from the surface, it is worth staying with those 2 hours of moonwalk a little longer. The astronauts had a timeline, but they were also human beings, experiencing a place no one had ever stood before. They moved in 1/6 of Earth's gravity, learning how to balance and turn in heavy suits. A step could become a gentle bounce, a tool could feel different in gloved hands. Dust clung to the suits and equipment. Shadows were sharp because the moon had no atmosphere to scatter the sunlight. The television images were ghostly and imperfect, but that made them feel almost dreamlike. Around the world, people watched pale figures moving slowly across grey ground. Families gathered around screens. Children stayed awake. In many countries, the moment was translated, narrated, and remembered in different languages. The moon was silent, but Earth was listening. That contrast is one of the most beautiful parts of Apollo 11. 2 people moving carefully in airless quiet, while hundreds of millions of people followed from a living planet far away. One quiet part of Apollo 11 is the role of computers. The guidance computer had far less power than modern devices, but it was built for a very specific task, helping navigate, calculate, and support flight. During the lunar descent, program alarms appeared. The system was overloaded, but it continued prioritizing essential tasks. Human judgment and machine design worked together under pressure. The spacesuits were also small spacecraft. They had to provide oxygen, pressure, cooling, communication, and protection from the harsh lunar environment. A suit had to let an astronaut move, bend, collect samples, and survive. Every glove, joint, hose, and layer mattered. The moonwalk looked slow, partly because moving safely on another world required care. The lunar samples were scientifically valuable. Moon rocks helped researchers understand the moon's surface, age, volcanic history, and relationship to Earth. The mission was symbolic, but it was also a geology expedition. Each sample bag, photograph, and measurement turned the moon from a distant object into a place that could be studied directly. Apollo 11 also depended on people whose names are less famous. Engineers, mathematicians, seamstresses, technicians, flight controllers, programmers, factory workers, medical teams, recovery crews, and many others. A moon landing is remembered through 3 astronauts, but it was made possible by a vast network of human labour. So the moon landing can be held in 2 ways at once. It was a national project of the Cold War, and it was also a human moment of looking back at Earth from somewhere else. That image remains gentle and enormous, our planet seen from a distance, bright against black space, holding every ocean, forest, city, language, conflict, and lullaby. The moon had been studied long before Apollo. Ancient observers tracked its phases. Early telescopes revealed craters and mountains. Maps improved over centuries. The lunar surface slowly became less like a symbol and more space. Apollo 11 was part of that long chain of looking. The difference was that for the first time, human beings could look back from the surface itself. Communication was essential. Voices travelled between Earth and Moon by radio. Short phrases carried enormous weight because every word belonged to procedure, safety, and history. There is something moving about that. A human voice crossing space. Calm because it had to be calm. Precise because lives depended on precision. Communication also depended on many people who never left Earth. In mission control, flight controllers watched systems, listened to loops of audio, checked numbers, and made recommendations. Each controller had a specific area of responsibility. No one person could hold the entire mission alone. The calm language of mission control can sound almost understated. Go, no go, we copy, stand by. The phrases are short because short phrases reduce confusion. In a dangerous environment, clear words become part of the safety system. There were also tracking stations and communication networks around the world, helping maintain contact as Earth turned and the spacecraft moved. Apollo was not only 3 astronauts in one control room, it was a global chain of listening. This makes the mission feel quieter and larger at the same time. A voice from the moon could reach Earth because antennas, engineers, operators, controllers, and procedures were all arranged to receive it. The wonder was not only that someone spoke from another world. The wonder was that the world had learned how to hear. The lunar module was left behind in stages. The descent stage remained on the moon, while the ascent stage lifted Armstrong and Aldrin back to orbit. This means Apollo 11 left artifacts on the lunar surface, equipment, footprints, experiments, and traces of a brief human visit. The moon became an archive. The mission also changed imagination, science fiction, politics, education, engineering, and childhood dreams all absorbed the image of a person walking on another world. For many people, the moon landing became proof that distant things could become reachable, though only through enormous shared effort. And now, let the moon return to the night sky. It is no longer only a place humans reached. It is also the familiar light outside the window, pulling tides, marking months, and keeping silent company with Earth. The lesson ends where wonder begins, looking up. I want to thank you for listening to Whisper University. If you made it all the way to the end, I'm very glad you are here. I hope tonight's quiet lesson helped you relax, learn something new, or simply drift for a little while in a calmer direction. If you enjoyed this whispered lecture, you can support Whisper University by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a gentle comment with a topic you would like to hear next. It helps this little university grow and helps us